is the Olympic National Park. He's gonna go look.
You all set?
Yes.
Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Veronica Valley Park Committee to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A roll call, please.
Mr. Behrens.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Present.
Mr. Popa.
Here.
Mr. Walter.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Approval of agenda, late additions, or any deletion. Don't think there's room for deletion. Any change?
Looks good to me.
Move to accept the agenda as presented.
Here a second on that? Second from John Walter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Tom Adams is here. He's going to speak at this point in the public comment period, principally to inform us of the tree protection and replanting of trees that we've lost at Veronica, but the tree protection work that he's, well, I don't know that the protection work has started, but all the planning, all the process is underway. Tom, fill us in.
Could you have a seat, because that way you'll be heard better on return.
Sure thing. Thank you. It's Tom Adams from the Conservation District. I'm the resource specialist there. We've been planting trees down at Veronica Valley for at least 10 years, all native trees. This year we have plans for some replacements, about 30 of them. And in the past, we've done enclosures that have been plastic netting, and they've worked pretty good so far. It's keeping the deer out, but the rabbits are able to hold the fence and going in and feeding on our trees during the winter. They don't bother the conifers very much, but other deciduous trees, usually they get about 50% of them every year. Some things that we've been doing was making enclosures, our metal fence. What's planned is a 3-foot diameter enclosure that protects the core tree if the limbs go out beyond that. We purchased a small amount of them, approximately 10, that we'll be installing there, and we'll be replanting some of the trees that had died with those 30 trees. Also, I will put up some signage on several of the fences explaining why we're doing what we're doing, using it kind of like a demonstration for anybody in the county that wants to follow suit in sort of an educational thing. That's kind of the long and short of what we're up to. Any questions?
You said just 10 trees?
10 enclosures, there'll be 30 trees, some of them will go into the existing enclosures. There'll be about 10 metal ones. It's 2x4 fence, it's 5 feet high, and it's openings in the fence is 2x4. Usually keeps the rabbits out. We'll also be putting a tree guard around the trees that we're planting, just like the orchards use. It works out really well. I've done it on my own place, we've done it in some other places at the national park. And in fact, they're going to be putting up, there are about 50 of them this year, the metal fences, because the plastic fences aren't working out well there. In fact, in one case, the deer went right underneath that plastic fence, lifted it up, went in there. There was apples in there they wanted to eat. So again, sometimes the deer aren't our friends. Trees, we replant them many times over, and just like the orchards, they're putting fences around their orchards now because they can't keep replanting them and stay in business. Yes?
What about wrapping the enclosures with wire, just a short, along with the plastic?
We could try that. That would be, buy us another level of insurance. If the county had it, I would be glad to install it on those 10. It is a big ticket item. In fact, on my own, I have some chicken wire. It's about 2 foot high, probably an inch or inch in diameter holes in it, and by additional protection for the rabbits.
Were you thinking, Scott, with the question about those larger enclosures? That would be the big enclosures with the plastic fence. Go ahead and put some of the chicken wire
Just a
2-footer around that too.
I'd be glad to be a part of that and put it up if the county wants to buy it. I don't know what the measurements are. My guess is it's probably, could be up to 300 feet. Or, I don't know.
Between
That
the,
would give us more
I think-
protection than what we already have.
Yeah, I think that would fit into our maintenance real easily, and we could, Scott will get it and let you know when it's there, and let's get it up. I think that's a good idea. I'm doing that around my gardens. It's darn rabbits. It's not the deer, it's the rabbits.
Rabbits.
Squirrels.
We have problems with squirrels, voles. It's not a mouse, it's a vole. It's the mouse family, a little short-tailed thing that just loves to graze on them. And some of them go under the ground and graze on the roots. Some of them girdle the tree right at the ground level. Depending on which one you have. Dirt around the orchards, use them all the time, you know. Orchards put out what they call mouse bait, and they're really addressing the vole, what they're addressing. Then they have to have something to protect it from the turkeys and other things going in. But, I don't think we're gonna do that there unless the county wants to pursue that.
Scott, are we clear that we can get the wire fencing under maintenance budget? Okay.
Maybe not
Yeah,
both
that-
enclosures.
Cal's got to figure that out. That's
I
weird.
will be out there Monday planting trees with Colin Olsey, and, we can measure up how much fences needed at that time.
But, see, we're,
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other question? John and Steve, good with Tom right now? We're good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for all your work.
yeah, that's
Very
right.
much. So the main topic on the agenda today is what I began first mentioning at our last meeting, which was now, March. Wondering about Veronica and our milfoil being a source of milfoil into Lake Leelanau. Well, that prompted a phone call to Brian Price. We had an interesting conversation. I invited Brian, and he's invited his technical assistant, Ron, to be with us today to have just a discussion about milfoil and hopefully about Brian's idea that possibly our ponds can be used as test beds for their mitigation possibilities. They have a number of ideas, and it may be beneficial to them to use our ponds as a small area for testing some of those ideas. So Brian and Ron, if you'd come up forward.
Is there anything there you want to test and try things out or not? It's a good area to do it. And see how matting works and stuff and everything.
Yeah, well, I am interested, we can tell you, a little bit about the history of what we are doing and how we approach the problem of milfoil in the lake. A lot of people have a pretty good understanding, especially John, who's on the board of the Lake Association, but I think the rest of you have a pretty good understanding of that too. We opted to use almost entirely biodegradable burlap barriers that just sort of completely knock the plants down to the bottom and shade them out so that they die. And that works well. I don't know how it would work in a pond setting. I mean, it does work. The problem is you gotta get everything.
Well, how come we asked about the pond, or thought you could volunteer? Some of those back ponds and stuff, you can walk right up to the edge. For a lake, you gotta have a boat, and you gotta dive and all that. If you wanted to try various net, well, it's not gonna be milfoil, but you say, hey, let's try a 10-foot net here and lay it down, and then come back in a month and see if everything's dead. There you could pull it back out and look, and you could put it back in. It's just a perfect area without having to go out in boats and trying stuff. And we discussed it and thought, there's a couple ponds there that you might want to see how various things, if you know they work and it's fine, you don't need to do any experiments, then that's fine, but.
Well, I'm interested in the history of when milfoil, Eurasian water milfoil, showed up in the ponds.
I'm not sure it's really in there that
records
thick.
on that, or is it kind of go back in the memory of people that say, well, I think, that the weeds were in there not long after. I wonder what kind of, and when were the first treatments? The last treatment was 2 years ago now.
Yes, and it's the only treatment that I'm aware of.
But was it for milfoil or
Yes.
just, it was strictly? And she let us spray on it.
Was it?
Pardon me?
Heather.
Well,
We
they,
treated it. We used a spray at that time, 2,4-D,
Okay, right.
and it worked fine. Up till then, we were hooking a lot of it, but I didn't know if it was milfoil. I thought it was just pondweed that was so darn thick, we didn't know how to kill it.
well, there may be some of that, but certainly milfoil was identified 2 years ago, yes, by Savin Lake Services. I could see it as well.
Oh, well, it was identified by me 2 years ago too.
Yeah.
Was it?
I went to kids' fishing day with our grandkids, and, it was hard to fish.
Yeah, 2 years
At
ago.
times, because you're thrown into big banks of weeds, most of which were Eurasian water milfoil on the day that I was there.
Now, Stephen Scott may know more history prior to that, but it was that kids' fishing day that made me realize we have to do something to manage weeds here if the fishing is going to continue to be accessible, because it really wasn't very fishable that year. And that now was, that was the event of, 3 years ago this June, because we didn't have one 2 years ago or last year. But the first spray application then was 2 years ago this spring, the only spray
The
application.
first and only. And before that, there were some sporadic attempts to try to use divers to pull the weeds or knock them back or.
Well, not divers.
Yeah.
Mechanical means.
But the spray treatment of 2,4-D was seemingly quite
It
successful.
was.
And last year, they came to follow up, and they didn't find any Eurasian water milfoil. One thing that Dave mentioned to me was that they found curly leaf pondweed, you believe, or is it in do you have a report with the?
No, we found one example of it with the two techs from Savin Lake Services, who were the weed applicators, and that's where we had a contract with Savin. And near the bridge, there was one growth of curly pondweed, fairly contained.
If in fact it's there, that's also a concern, because it's an invasive plant that doesn't belong there, and it's not known from the rest of the watershed. So there's a number of interesting questions, and John was getting at part of it. It's a place where we might be able to do some experimentation, but one of the things that's interesting is, depending on when Eurasian water milfoil showed up in the ponds, it may have been the first time it showed up anywhere in the watershed. We believe well, there were floating plants, fragments. We didn't know the source, but they were floating around in the lake in 2017. They were, and going back to the aerial drone imagery, there is only one suspicious looking weed bed that we can identify from the imagery done in 2017, and it's right there. It's where the creek comes out, where Mayberg Creek comes out, and then you go north about a couple hundred yards, not very far. And that weed bed, actually, we're gonna try and knock it out this year. But it's difficult. If you know that part of the lake, it's shallow, full of stumps. It is just one nasty place to work. I think that's why we put it off for as long as we have. And the other excuse being that it's kind of separate because of the shoal in front of it, and it probably doesn't mix too much with the rest of the lake. But still, we're trying to kill every instance where we find it in the lake. Those are interesting. So is it possible that the presence of the plant in the ponds is the source of what got into the lake? It's possible, but we'll never know. I don't even think it's the most likely thing. I think it's still likely that it came in on a boat somewhere. The other thing that's really of interest to us is sort of you've got a confined area that's a pretty good experimental spot. As far as we know, and what you can read in the literature, chemical treatments knock the heck out of the stuff, but they almost never get it all. They don't, there's some plants, some roots, whatever, that stay viable, and it usually comes back within a few years. And the normal thing as far as, Ron, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like most places then wait until it gets bad again and becomes a nuisance and boaters and fishermen complain about it, and then they do another chemical treatment. Some states don't even allow that. They say one time, you can do this one time. But we have a sort of a theory that it's got to come back in just a few plants. If you're committed to actually covering those few plants with small barriers, maybe as small as this tabletop, for instance, depending on what you need to get it all underneath a barrier and shade it all. You could just like covering stuff in your garden to kill weeds. But if you are committed to doing that, you may be able to knock it out and keep it out. So that you're not going through this cycle of chemical treatments every 3, 4, 5 years or whatever, which I'm sure you want to avoid, just like everybody else does. We don't know all of the things about the fate of these chemicals, but nobody wants to use them, right, if you can avoid it. And then the third question is, would the Lake Association be interested in helping or seeing, or experimenting with different things in a more controlled environment? And the answer to that is yes. I guess first we got to see what comes back and when it comes back. But we're pretty, we have our approach to these things. We think we want to try certain things, but you have to be adaptable. You can't. The weed always surprises you. It shows up where you didn't expect it, and it doesn't, Ron, you probably got some things you're thinking about.
Yeah, a couple. So ponds don't get boat traffic. So my question would be, how did it get into the ponds? And I guess the only theory I can maybe think of is, are beavers traversing Beaver Creek? Could it have started in like Leelanau and beavers taking it up into the pond?
Or vice versa, yeah.
Well, vice versa, except that how did it start in the ponds? If there's no boats going in and out of the ponds, birds aren't carrying it in there. So I'm like, that's an interesting question.
We've certainly had beaver.
Or muskrats.
Muskrat's probably
Muskrats are always
much
carrying
more.
plants.
So it's just a question. Another question I have is, have you ever done a aquatic plant survey of the ponds? Because we would want to know what other plants are there, natives, and also to try to get an idea of what percent. Like, is it 100% Eurasian water milfoil, or 98%, 2% curly leaf pondweed, or are there other plants in there that we would want to try to have them take over, not take over, but, you know, be healthy in a healthy ecosystem with it?
I don't know of any survey that was done.
I don't know.
I would think that's pretty high, that would be high priority.
Can you assist us with that?
Yeah.
With a survey?
Yeah, I mean, we know the plants and such, I don't know what it would take, but I would think that would be an important piece before we did any experimental. We would have to know what's there, what percent, where they are, what are we dealing with? And then the other thought I had, Brian, is the tribe is actually starting with us a research project with Grand Valley. And so they might have an interest in using the ponds as
Oh, yeah,
well,
a
either
student
tool
might-
or either trying some experimental things.
Yeah,
That might be another.
that'd be a good thing for a student to write a paper on or something.
Yeah, so that might be something to think about as well.
Well, we're just offering it and thought, you got ideas, it's there. And I know you guys are chasing around the big waters, pretty heavy. But there's a little spot to experiment, and I don't think you need a DEQ permit.
That was my last question.
That is a question.
What's
Can we try things without
Yeah,
having to go and get a permit every time?
That's the question.
It's one of the problems that we have on the lake.
Right, you got a big problem there.
Well, because of the involvement of the tribe, and the fact that they have a pretty broad work plan that's approved by the DNR, that shields us from. But in other instances, every time you discover Eurasian water milfoil in a place you didn't find it before, and you want to do anything other than just hand pull it, you need to go and get a permit, which takes time, and it might be that if you find it in June, which is typically when you would find it, when it starts to come up, and you can see it, it would take till the end of the summer before you get a permit.
Well, we sprayed it and we sent people there to jerk all the stuff out. And we hired, some people did it for free, and you cut that stuff off and they haul it away and never got any permit.
Oh, I know.
Whether you
Well-
cut it, pull it, spray it, or whatever.
We certainly got permits for the sprays.
We did. That was a chemical that
Yeah,
entered
yeah.
into the water.
And
Well, we
you
got
have-
it from Heather.
Well, we got it from Eagle.
I guess we
Um,
could,
I don't know if it was an Eagle permit.
Savin got permits.
Seven did all that for us, and they, just as you said, the timing, they were seeking that permit in March, each of the 2 years. I mean, we did lose that money last year when in the end, we didn't treat because we had gotten a permit in the month of March.
And that, the work that they did before they actually made application for the permit, there is some time involved in that too. You know, for Savin, we'd be a year ahead when we're gonna have them do something. We're talking to them in the fall if they're gonna do something the next spring. Then Dave follows through with multiple meetings with them.
if you don't have in written records what they, the permit that they applied for probably would have listed at least, maybe not a thorough vegetation survey, but it would have said, some estimate of where the plants were, what it was that they were targeting, how much chemical they would use, all that kind of stuff.
We should,
Anything you've got in writing, and including the follow-up, that would be worthwhile.
we should be able to get.
We should
some
be
of
able to get
from
that.
Savin.
I'll work
Yeah,
on
maybe
tracking
just
that.
request those
Oh, yeah.
records.
Yeah.
And, you didn't the weeds were so bad that I think you did what you needed to do at the time, and we've chosen to try to deal with Eurasian water milfoil in the lake without using chemicals because, it never completely wipes it out. But, I don't think that we're talking about, we could have some sort of a understanding where, of course, we're not gonna do anything with ponds without having your approval and coming to you, but I'm not sure if you want to give us the opportunity to help in managing this stuff. What we're talking about is not a lot of money, or any money necessarily, except it would cost some money to do a vegetation survey because there's time involved.
It'd be interesting to see this Grand Valley thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be that, you know, if they need a controlled area where they can, you know, conduct some experiments. I mean, we have lots of interesting questions about how long do the barriers need to be on these plants in order to kill them. John was kind of heading in that direction. We tend to get regrowth around the edges of the barriers. So, you know, if you think about it, you're killing the top of the plant, but some of the roots alive. And if the roots can send out shoots far enough to get to the edge of the barrier, they're going to come up. How far is that? You know, like how small a barrier is just too small. We don't know these things, but we're very interested because as we work on the lake, we're trying to use smaller and smaller barriers to deal with smaller and smaller infestations. And we believe that you've got to kill it. You've got to get all of it in each discrete infestation. If you get 80%, you know, you haven't done a whole lot. So, does that make sense, Steve?
It does.
Makes a lot of sense. Heather might have an informal listing of what weeds might be there. I've heard her make comments about the weeds to a certain degree, so she may have an informal listing of what's there. And who is it that do you work with Robin Schmidt to do the permitting? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
Robin's very knowledgeable.
I'll touch base with Robin and see what we need on the pond side.
Heather will be there on Kids Fish Day here in another 6 weeks.
She'll be there in planting too.
Oh, is she
Dave,
gonna be there when they dump the fish?
she typically is there.
She said she was going to be there.
Do you have the check yet?
No.
Why don't we walk over to accounting after our meeting and.
Okay.
I think for now, though, we should, like, once things start to grow, and they won't probably start for a few weeks to where you can see your Asian water well. But we don't want to be taken by surprise this time. That opportunity to try to find it when it's just a clump here and a clump there and kill each one of those so you don't let it get to the point. I mean, in one season, it can go almost nothing to pretty expansive stuff, we think. And
Well,
so,
it's certainly seemed to do with that.
You've got to be continually vigilant probably through the month of June and then again, maybe late summer. Look carefully for it to make sure if it's there, you want to know about it, you want to try to deal with it. And we would probably, if we needed a permit to use barriers, we'd probably want to get that permit. But if we don't need a permit because it's a confined, non-navigable body of water, you know, all the better. Then we can, and we might still want to use some sort of watercraft. But
You said that's something you can sort out?
I'll contact Robin Schmidt. And then, you know, it's nice that you guys are working in the lake and, you know, you're chasing it down and we're, you know, and I'm interested in the kinds of signage that we might put up. We've got to, you know, as far as passing bits and pieces between pond and lake, they're about this tall and they're called teenagers or preteens. And they have fishing hooks and fishing poles and they've got middle buckets and, you know, they're casting out there and they're snagging and they're getting those little bits and pieces everywhere.
Weeds in, they might be throwing it in the big bucket, little fragments. That's one way it can get from there to the lake, or
So we've got a big thing out there with a disease going, and then we've got a little tiny thing over here with a disease going, and maybe we're passing it back and forth. And I'm interested in signage, just to kind of alert the families and the little kids and the big kids and everybody that, okay, we have this here, and you don't want it in any other lake where you fish, and here's what you can do. Here's what you probably should do when you leave Veronica Valley Park, or when you leave Lake Leelanau. I mean, if you're going to come to the park or if you're going to leave the park.
Absolutely. Signage is a good thing. It's also just so people recognize the stuff, yeah. But there's also, I was just thinking, we would probably want to look for a curly leaf pond. If it's rumored to be there, we ought to check it out. If it is there and it's nowhere else that we know of in the whole watershed, we want to drop a barrier on that.
Is that the
That's all
case?
there is to it.
Is that the case right now, that you don't know of it in other parts of the watershed?
That's right.
Wow.
It's not reported from the vegetation survey that the Lake Association had done. And we're going to do a much more extensive survey this summer, and Ron's going to be in charge of that, really.
They're not, are they seeing it at Glen Lake?
They have it in Glen Lake, and they removed it. Over there, Rob Carner, who everybody here knows, I think, it was, vigilant, right? And when they found it in one location, he got all the kids from Leelanau School to go out there. They have slave labor now. And they pulled it out.
Oh,
You don't need a permit, hand pull. So, they pulled it out. They must have been thorough about it. They kept going back to make sure they got it all. But they believed that they had an infestation, they got rid of it.
And they corral Glen Lake schools too.
Maybe.
They do, yeah. Well, that'd be good to know.
What would be involved in getting your assistance in doing this aquatic plant survey?
It's not a very big area.
No,
It may
it's
have
not. Are you thinking of, I was just there last night for the first time, because I knew I was coming to meet. I've never been there before, but there's the pond with the bridge, fishing pond. Are you just talking that pond, or are you talking, I see on the map there's some pond in the back.
Well, we do stock fish in the long pond at the back.
Oh,
I have not been aware of milfoil in that pond.
okay.
The one time it was infested, surface really covered.
Oh,
I think it's common pondweed, but I'm not.
okay. But that's never been treated, the only treatment was in the.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
And are you aware of any other, like, purple loosestrife or phragmites, or any other invasive species that would be around the perimeter?
I know both of those, and I don't recall.
Okay, yellow flag iris.
I never saw any phragmites back then.
Okay. That'd be another thing to keep an eye on, as long as you're trying to get rid of invasives, that would be another thing to do, at least do a survey, know what's there. So you can attack, that stuff's a little easier to deal with than submergent aquatics, because you got to do stuff underwater.
How about the algae, Cara, and are they?
Those are all native. Yeah.
Not really a concern. In fact, Cara is reputed to be really good at keeping duration of milfoil at bay, competing with it. So, I don't know. That's what we've heard from an expert.
Well, now
Almost every native plant you want to encourage. Now, having said that, the nutrients that find their way into the pond, I presume, are the old fertilizers that might have been used on the golf course. No such stuff is used anymore. Yeah, so, I mean, keeping nutrients flowing into those ponds at a minimum should, right, over time, reduce the amount of aquatic vegetation that comes up. So, I mean, if you can keep the bad stuff, get it down and then get it out, Should have some beautiful ponds. Yeah.
The,
Fishing ponds.
the Cara is pretty, and what's the name of the other one? Philomungus?
Yeah,
Are you talking on Elton? Nitro Elton? Nitella? Tilapia?
It's like fibrous, just vast.
does it have branching?
Probably Nitella. Those are the three that we find in Lake Leelanau.
Well, certainly the Cara is really extensive.
Huge mass.
Oh, the filamentous, oh, I thought you were talking, okay, yeah, so that there's, so that can be, it's all native. There's Spirogyra, Zygnema, Mudiotia. There's 3 or 4 species of that form these green, slimy, Cladophora is another one. But those are,
Just keeping the nutrients.
they're not invasive.
They're
They're not invasive, but yeah, that's gonna be, those are usually nutrient indicators. If we're getting too many nutrients into a lake, you're gonna get those kinds of algal blooms.
Still have that giant turtle in there.
Oh,
That big?
Thing's huge. I wonder how many fish hooks is in its
That
mouth.
might keep the vegetation survey people at bay, I don't know.
Well, what,
I think we have some research to do. Maybe you're gonna check with Heather and get a listing, informal listing, maybe, and I'll talk to Robin Schmidt to see what kind of permits we might need.
so what
I
I'm
don't
hearing
know,
Steve
I don't
say
know, I don't know if we're at a recommendation point for the full commission or not.
I'm not sure we are. because
Maybe
I'm
a
not
little
sure what-
premature, maybe we can make public comment and let the full commission know that we are in contact with these guys and that it'd be a good partnership and we're thinking about signage and we're thinking about working together. We've got a mutual problem and we're passing stuff probably back and forth between each other and it'd be good to kind of get a handle on it and they may be able to assist us in some identification. And we
If a
could.
permit is necessary for curly leaf pond weed or for Eurasian wild milfoil, you might want to get that process started. I don't think it would be either expensive or difficult, although there is a processing charge. It might be waived for units of government, I don't know.
Well, I'll get that from Robin and whatever, say, yeah, if we need a permit, I'll get it. I think it just behooves us to get a permit and we can re-up it and keep the ball rolling. That way, whenever we see whatever we see, we can drop a mat on it.
And in the meantime, we'll also, on our end, seek out what information we have,
Yeah.
if any, of,
Maybe the chemical people do it.
sure, sure. And we may have some from Heather, at the DNR with the work she's done with the fish management plan. We'll look at that. If we have little or nothing, I'll be back in touch
Okay.
about the possibilities of you helping us with that.
Sounds good.
Should we, last year the Cara was extensive. I mean, just through Fish Day on into mid-July. It was that bright green and just a ton of it.
Is it the stuff you pull up like on a fish hook thing, and then it's kind of crusty, it's got the calcium carbonate on it? Because it's usually not green, it's usually not, it's more of a gray,
With white on it or
yeah, what?
cream.
Probably white gray precipitate on it, and it only grows, the carrot's not gonna be very big off the bottom. So maybe,
It's like a carrot.
maybe you're thinking, is it maybe, I don't know, I'm maybe.
Well,
filamentous algae?
Well, I'm only going by what the Savin text coached me on, told me last year.
Oh,
Is that accurate? Maybe not.
oh, okay, yeah, so
Maybe not.
maybe this year just be good to see what's going on. You gotta know that first before you can have a plan. I think they're probably talking about filamentous algae, the green, right, the green, some of it's slimy, a lot of it's slimy,
Does it not attach to the bottom?
not always, no.
Because what was so prevalent last year started in this bright green as warm-up initially started, stayed that way, and into the summer before it began to turn gray, brown,
Bet it's not Carol, but it could be.
whatever it is, does not attach to the bottom. And really provided pretty good cover for fish. I mean, there were tunnels through it and,
It's definitely not Carol. Carol's always attached to that.
okay,
It's only typically grown up
okay.
this much.
Well, then,
Yeah, so it's something different, but it definitely is a.
forget my information because it ain't right.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's a planter, macroalga that we could easily identify and see what's going on.
We will see what we know,
We got another meeting at 2:30.
right, on our end of it.
Okay, good.
And simply through me initially contact,
We'll just stay in touch.
we'll just stay in touch and keep this conversation going.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you much.
Who wants to snorkel in there with that turtle?
What's that?
Who wants to snorkel in there with that
I'm
turtle?
not gonna go on it.
Remember that Ding-a-ling song?
Yeah.
Where he went across Turtle Creek?
Yeah. I think we could avoid most of it. We will have to.
I move that we approve the minutes from March 14th.
I looked at them, I second it.
Any other discussion? I approve of that myself. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah,
For the record, state, it was Brian Price, he's a fisheries biologist, or was he?
He wears a lot of hats. I don't know his official hat. Dave will track him
The
down.
other man, what was his?
Dave will have to fill you in. I miss it.
Oh, we-
Is it recorded?
No, but for the minutes it would be helpful.
Dave will track those down. He knows those.
Yeah, long legs.
It's right on the tip of my tongue. Brian was just the head of the Conservancy, and we hired him as the Lake Leelanau biologist. His title is Lake Leelanau Lake Association biologist. The other guy is now his assistant that we hired. God, I can't think. Ron Remick. Ron Reminick. R-E-M-I-N-I-K.
Oh, I recognize that name. He's in that same, he's in the association as well, right?
Yeah, Brian just couldn't handle it all himself, and Ron Reminick is gonna be like running pontoon boats and stuff and whatever. So he's the assistant lake biologist. Not sure of the spelling of Reminick,
I
R-E-M.
can find it.
Yeah.
They've got a listing of the members of the Lake Association.
Brian Price is the biologist for the Lake Leelanau Lake Association. Ron Reimink, R-E-I-M-I-N-K, I-M-I-N-K, is project manager.
Also for the Lake Leelanau Lake Association.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's the status from your end of it, of the 2% application?
It's on the agenda for the May board session, so at this point, just a cursory review and recommendation to the Parks to endorse it.
I move we recommend to the Parks and Rec Commission to endorse the application of 2% funds as presented.
For the, it's not child family services, is it?
It's for Youth Works, which is under the umbrella of Child and Family Services.
For invasive species eradication?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you get that?
Recommendation to P&R Commission to endorse the application of the 2% funds I got as presented. What should I call it?
um,
Why is it going through?
For some
Oh,
mitigation.
on
Sorry.
behalf of the Youth Works Organization for Invasive Species Removal at Veronica Valley Park.
You
We
work
can, yeah,
on behalf of
we
you.
can clean it up for the regular session.
Do we need one of us there? At the-
It's always helpful.
And that's executive session is next
Next Tuesday.
9 o'clock in the morning?
It will probably be a little bit further down on the agenda.
Yeah, I would assume that, yeah. Okay,
You need a second.
well, one of us will be there.
You didn't have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion, further discussion?
Why are we going through the child services thing?
No, Youth Works,
Why are they on it?
Youth Works is an offshoot.
yeah, Youth Works, which is Bill Watson's organization that drew up the application for us and would provide the crew. They work under the umbrella. They're part of, they work under an umbrella of Child and Family Services. Bill was initially with SEEDS, the SEEDS organization. He shifted from SEEDS to Youth Works and got Child and Family Services to be the, in effect, parent sponsor of the Youth Works program. Does that answer your question, John?
I guess.
Okay. So, all in favor of the motion as we have it at this moment? Can you read back any piece of it?
I can read that. Motion by Christensen to recommend to the PNR committee to endorse the application of 2% funds on behalf of Youth Works. That's all I have.
For invasive species removal at Veronica Valley Park.
Frankly, I think Youth Works is adequate. I don't know that we have to go any farther with who they are.
Someone will ask.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye on my end. And I communicated with Bill yesterday what I thought was the timing, and I was correct. So he'll be aware that this, I told him the process again, and that would get started with next Tuesday's meeting. That's all I have at this moment.
Thank you for
No-
what you do.
I'm good.
No more public comment. How about board commissioner comment?
I'm good.
I'm good. But thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you, all of you, for what each of you do, because we're all contributing and it's really helping.
Dave, I did a little sketch on covering the Veronica Valley. Oh, I'm sorry. I was coughing, and so I turned my microwave away. I did a little sketch. I didn't ask, but this was a layout of a potential of a covering for Veronica Valley. And we can do it for next month. I can show you a drawing. I don't know what to do.
And you're talking about, we've used the term pavilion or learning center or,
I wanted to call Steve because he had a good word for it, and I can't remember what it was.
I'll check the minutes.
picnic cover.
Learning center
Yeah, it was.
area.
Do you have something like open area learning center?
Well, how about if we hold that, John?
Yeah, that's okay. I just,
Yeah, okay.
From,
But you have done some drawings.
I did a drawing on
Okay.
it. It shows,
yeah, if you could get that around, and I'm sure we're gonna have another Veronica
Yeah, I'll
Valley
just-
meeting. We've got fish planting and whatnot going on, so, we can kind of peruse that the next,
yeah, and I'll just give you a copy. I made some copies and give it to you, but.
yeah, get it around, get it to all of the committee, all of us here in the committee, and then next committee meeting, we can take a peek and get the ball rolling. I think we're well on our way to spending our money this year, so
Yeah, I
it's
didn't,
probably going to be,
Just one more step.
we're probably gonna put it, on a wish list. I don't know, we get to the budget time and I might tap Dave, I don't know. As it is now on the budget processes, we're, in motion to spend our money pretty easily on our budget, on a yearly basis with the way our committees are working and whatnot. So we have to decide how we're going to proceed with our items that are a little larger that would have a tendency not even to fit in the budget individually. So, anyway, we'll move forward on that. And, yeah, in the budget process, I'll probably grab Dave and brainstorm. That's coming.
Do we know anything about scheduling of budget meetings in June?
I thought we had it. The executive committee meeting is scheduled for either before or after the regular session in June.
I think it's after.
And that's when you'll discuss your budget.
Can,
Probably have a little conversation with our finance director and see if we could maybe get a packet release ahead of time.
Pavilion is
So
great.
we don't
Deep,
get
because
it in front of the week.
Steve had a good word.
yeah, it's a pretty tight turnaround that's requested and
It's not sheltered.
it doesn't fit into the monthly meeting
Yeah, it's
schedule
something
very
like
easily.
learning center. I like the word learning center. I'll put that down.
So Laurel, again, that, you say, I'm not finding that schedule right now.
It was part of the regular session meeting notes. Yes. Your approved Parks and Recreation Commission schedule. June 1st, 2:30 is the regular board session, and then 3:30 or immediately following regular is the executive committee.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it is here. My question to us is, do we need another meeting of this group before that June 1st?
Why don't we brainstorm that a little later today with the whole group?
Okay.
And try to, I think Laurel is kind of heading that way with maybe a request to get the packet a little sooner, but at our commission meeting today, we can brainstorm how we're going to go through the budget process.
Then this
That'll
question.
answer that question, I think.
Okay. A little bit separate question. Does this group need a meeting yet before the June full commission meeting? I mean, our full commission, Parks and Rec.
That has some possibility. I think when we brainstorm later today at the commission meeting, we should possibly make recommendations to whatever committees need to meet to provide information for the exec committee to do the budget.
Okay.
Laura, does that make sense? Yeah, I think that
Okay. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Okay, next, you guys are gonna have a short meeting?
This is what the basic was. I started with the idea that maybe